Paul is ticked. He is ticked off. My name's Aaron McCoy. I am a geek with the Bible, and we're going through Galatians, and right now Paul is getting mad. Normally Paul's a bit more lighthearted, a bit more friendly, but this is him at his probably his angriest. So we're here at chapter 3. He says, "Oh, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified." So what's he so mad about? Why is he calling them fools? Because they are giving up the gospel of grace for a gospel of works. They are abandoning this whole notion that you are justified by Jesus, by his sacrifice, by what he did. They are leaving that for this idea of, oh, I've got to be circumcised. Oh, I've got to join this party. Oh, I've got to do this thing. I have to conform this Bible study. I have to do that and that, and volunteer here and do that. Do all these things in order to be made right. And Paul is saying, no, you have completely lost it. Someone must have bewitched you. He's like, there must have been some kind of a curse. There must have been some kind of a glitch in the matrix. Something must have happened because I was just there. I was just there explaining it to you. You got this. You understood it. Said it was as if it was right before your eyes. Didn't you get this? That Christ died so that you can live. Christ died to justify you. As we said last time, said if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. He says, listen, if you guys are going to works, if you guys are going to do, like what would have been the point? If you could just make yourself right with God by doing things the right way, if that could work, why was Jesus even here? Why did he even die? What was this whole process for? No, he died so that we could be justified to God. That's the whole thing, is that us by our nature, we are enemies to God. Now, I don't think that God has been our enemies, but we, like, there's sometimes my kids, they'll get mad at me. Just earlier today, my son tried to bite me. I don't know the last time you've had somebody try to bite you, but if they do, they usually think that you are the enemy. Now, I am not my son's enemy. My heart was never away from my son. But at that moment, because he was getting overheated and I thought that he needed to come inside and get a drink of water and get cooled off in the AC, he tried to bite me. I became his enemy. And Christ is saying, listen, I'm reconciling. I'm mending that relationship. I am bringing you back. And he says, if you could just do it by your works, if you could just do it by behaving better, then Christ wouldn't have had to come. And so he's saying why he's mad. See, this is the thing. So sometimes when you think about false gospels, I usually think of people making things too easy. Right? So usually there's money involved. Usually it's people who's trying to get a lot of money out of people. And you'd think, oh, they don't talk about sin enough, or they don't talk about this enough. But what Paul is actually mad at is that they're not embracing grace enough. Get that. Let me say that again. Paul's frustration is not that they are sinning too much. His frustration is that they are not looking at God to be their source of forgiveness and love. Let that sink in. Really let that sink in. Now, I'm not saying that we should never talk about sin. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever, because we should. It's in there. But our foundation, our core, the utmost being of who we are children of the Most High God. That is the core of who you are. If you lose that, then everything starts to implode. Everything starts to collapse. And so then, so Paul, he's angry, he's furious because they're getting into something that leads to death. So this is one of the things that's interesting. Christianity faces a lot of criticisms, and the thing is that most of them I can't really argue with too much, because religion So, which I would define religion as doing works to try to be right with God. That's what I'm going to define religion as. The things that you do, the works that you perform to try to be right with God. Religion is horrible for the human spirit. It is horrible for wellness. It is horrible on humans and people. And this happens in the Christian church, and it drives me bonkers. People will take the gospel of Christ, which is a free gift of righteousness, and turn it into a bunch of do's and don'ts, and usually get someone who's manipulative and just wants you to follow the rules just because I said it, just because I'm, I am power tripping pastors. It drives me bonkers. It infuriates me whenever you see that kind of manipulation. And that's exactly what Paul's going through. And he's saying, you guys, you've turned the grace of God into a religion. Because it's not a religion, it's a relationship. It's God transforming you from the inside to the outside. He says, and so this is what he says he says, let me ask you only this, which that's great. I think that's a good idea. So anytime you're debating with somebody or questioning somebody, or ask them questions. That's a very good way to change minds. He says, did you receive the Spirit by works of the law or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, that now you are being perfected by the flesh? So these people, they've experienced this thing of the Spirit, which, different denominations have different thoughts of this. Some people would say that when you receive the Spirit, there's different miraculous giftings that come with that. But sometimes you could even say that just that experience, because a lot of times you'll hear this whenever people come to Christ, whenever they kneel at the altar, there's something very profound that happens, something very life-changing, something enormous that happens. You get this feeling that it's beyond anything that I know of. Whenever I'm in the presence of God, when I'm experiencing this thing, it's more fulfilling, life-giving than anything. I have seen the mountains of the Colorado. I have seen of the Colorado Rockies. I've seen oceans. I've seen wonders. I'm married. I have children. There is nothing that compares to the joy and wholeness that I feel when I am in the presence of God. It's overwhelming. And he's saying, now look, when you embrace this, when you embrace Jesus, was that because of things that you did? Did you have to do a bunch of stuff first before you got that? Or did you just embrace it? Did you just come to God and did he just fill you? It says, is that something that you earned? Is that something that you had to do? Was there some hoops that you had to do? Or did you just come to him? Talk to him? Worship? You just experience him, just embrace him, you just come to him. He says, so why? He says, you are so foolish. He says, having begun in the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? He says, if you started this way, if you started in the Spirit of being justified through faith, why are you now trying to perfect this by your own works, by your own efforts, by your own grit and determination? So we got to come back to Christ. And I think this is, I think the reason is, the reason that religion is so alluring and tempting, because I've been in there. I have. I've had a lot of times where I've gotten caught up in just what I'm doing rather than really listening to God. Because this is one of the things that happens whenever you're really following God. God will speak to you. Now, I've never heard any audible voices, but there's times when you'll feel something. You'll feel something in you, a knowing of what you're supposed to do. And usually it's not something you want to do for a lot of different reasons. Maybe you're scared. Maybe it's just what you're used to. Maybe it challenges your identity. But whenever you're in relationship with God, whenever you're following God in the Spirit, He's going to get to the core. But with religion, ooh, I get to decide what I give up. I get to decide what I'm going to follow. So I can say, so let's say God's saying, you know, whatever it is, I want you to confess something. I want you to give something. I want you to, um, I want you to slow down. You know, maybe slow down on your work, take some Sabbaths and be with your family. Whatever it is, we hear that. And now it's like, well, okay, I don't want to run away. I don't want to leave this. You know, because we're probably because you're afraid of hell would be my guess. Or maybe you just don't want to leave your Christian community. There's all kinds of things, but we'll say, no, 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 Jesus, I'm not going to give you what you're actually asking me, but how about this? How about I read my Bible more? How about that? How about I give you that? How about I serve in the children's church? Or how about I sing in the choir? How about I join this team or that team or do this thing? How about I go argue with people on Reddit for a while, trying to show how good you are? Whatever it is, we pull up a work to do. Say, oh, this is what's going to justify me. When Christ is saying, no, listen to me. I love you, but you're being stupid. You're being foolish. You're being a dummy. I don't want those things. You're justified right now. You don't have to make yourself right with me. But God says that what I want you to do is I want you to live. I want you to breathe in the life of God. Breathe in the goodness. Jesus said that the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come to give you life and life more abundantly, or life to the full. That's what Christ wants for you. He's not interested in you just following the do's and the don'ts. He wants you to be fully alive in Him. And there's things, I guarantee you, there's things, if you're feeling kind of that spiritual deadness, it's because there's things that He is asking of you, that you know He's asking of you, that you just don't want to give up. So then what do? We go to the flesh. We go to our own works. And you know the crazy thing is, I remember when I was in my senior year, I went on a church missions trip to the LA Dream Center, and it was very profound and powerful. And after that, I felt like God said, "Hey, you know, you need to go spend a year here." And I said, "Oh, we'll pray about that one later," because that was big. Because I'm so often a follower. I'm so often somebody who you know, I like the norm a lot of times. I like predictability a lot of times. But yet here, Jesus, I felt like God was saying, you're gonna have to give up a whole bunch. You're gonna have to give up something. And I'm like, I can't do that. And it kept going back and forth. And I feel that tug saying, hey, LA, and I'd say, haha, I'll pray about that later. And so eventually it was getting towards the end of my senior year, and I knew, I'm like, okay, I have to do this. I'm praying, and I remember saying, I can't. I remember just saying, I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. But then that next night, it was our youth meeting, and we had a guest speaker. And this guy, he just, man, the Spirit moved. The Spirit moved. And I was just overwhelmed. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I have to have you. I have to have this. I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to do it. And see, it was out of that. It was out of the Spirit. It was the Spirit moving me that pushed me there. And so this whole time, I had this whole idea of like, oh, this is going to be my year to die to myself, to give up of myself, to be a living sacrifice. When you know what happened? I remember I went in there. I remember waking up the next morning. I open my window. I see the Hollywood sign right out my window. And I'm a huge, huge movie fan. And I remember just looking out, beautiful day. And I remember just finally thinking, this is amazing. And it ended up being one of the most life-impacting years I've ever had in my life. It was amazing. It was great. It had challenges, sure, but it was absolutely amazing. Loved it there. And so a lot of times these things that we're hanging on to, these things that we want so bad, are things that are killing us. It's like if you've ever seen that movie 127 Hours with James Franco, it's great. This guy has his arm, true story, guy has his arm trapped under a boulder, and he can't get out. and he tries everything in his flesh, everything that he has to do to get out. And eventually he's dehydrated. He feels like he's dying, and he starts hallucinating. And he sees something. He sees a child. And this guy doesn't have any kids yet, but he sees his kid, and he says, I know that's my son. And he sees his son sitting at this chair. And he says, if I don't get to him, if I don't get to my son, then, or if I don't get out of here, I'm never going to meet my son. This isn't going to happen. And so eventually, once he does that, once he sees what he has to lose, once he sees the good, once he's propelled by not just his own life, but whenever he sees something beyond himself, he takes this little knife that he was chipping at the rock, and so it's dull and nothing. He takes that, and he starts, and just, oh, it's, if you see the movie, it's gross. It's oh, it's awful. But it's this thing that he breaks this thing off to get to what's truly good, to get what's truly worth living for. And so don't just do your life in the flesh, just following, what you're supposed to do. Follow the Spirit, and He might call you to rip something out, to take something down, to do something you really don't want to do. But if you want to live, if you really want to live, then you have to live in the Spirit. Follow what the Spirit is telling you. And it might be hard, but you will not be disappointed. Thank you. We'll see you next time.